So what Destination Next is it's a framework and foundation for helping drive a cultural shift. And it's really designed to help DMOs kind of become more modern and really understand the digital shift and how social plays a key role in that. So there's some really good, that's what I'm looking for. There we go, now it aligns. So what it does is it really paints a nice strategic roadmap for the next generation of DMOs. And it's a pretty big and far-reaching document, but I think for the purposes of an audience here, there's some core points that we can really help understand and make a difference within our organizations. And so what the Destination Next is, this is through Destination Marketing Association International, they've come up with these 3 pillars. And the first pillar for cultural change is dealing with the new marketplace. And so really it's looking at the shift from broadcasting and promotions to engagement. And I think as many of us as community managers and marketing managers and social media managers, this is something that's very near and dear to us. And what we want to talk about here is this is the real opportunity for us to be culture change makers within our organizations through engagement. So if you haven't looked at the Destination Next stuff, this is really good. There's some great stats and quotes in there that can help you communicate within your organization. And I know this personally because I do a lot of presentations and work with a lot of CVBs and destinations. And one of the things I've struggled is going into these organizations and telling them about the way the world is and what's happening. But now there's some really credible research that backs it up. And it's a great resource for you guys just to manage and talk with stakeholders. The other 2 core pillars that aren't necessarily as important for us because it's, we're talking about some big stuff of realignment, the business model with partnership. But there's some really good stuff in there about building and protecting the destination brand. And I think this is something that's also very relevant to us and our roles. So if you haven't had the opportunity to take a look at the Destination Next materials, just go look online, just for research purposes and having that ace in your back pocket to help you communicate with stakeholders and partners and peers. So what I wanted to, never mind. So what I wanted to do then is invite a couple panelists up here to have them share some of their stories and experiences in terms of some of the roadblocks and challenges that they've encountered within their organization, and more importantly, how some of the little things can bring about change within the corporate culture of moving towards more of a social and digital approach. So I've asked 3 panelists who have very nimbly agreed to be with me up here on the stage today. And I'm going to invite Zach Gribble from RTO4, Beverley Carkner from Ottawa Tourism, and Shelley Piraino from the Gulf Shores. All right, thank you guys for joining me up here. So far away over there. Yeah, I'll yell across the stage. So if you guys could just introduce yourselves to the audience. Zach, do you want to maybe start with yourself and just introduce yourself and your role?
My name is Zach Gribble, and I'm with RTO4. And we've had conversations how that sounds like something from Star Wars, but it's not. Regional organization, and I'm Director of Media Technology.
And I'm Beverley Carkner. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing at Ottawa Tourism. So I oversee both the website and social media.
And I'm Shelley Piraino. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager for Gulf Shores and Orange Beach Tourism. So everything with a screen.
Awesome. So I guess just to kind of iterate how sometimes small things can have a big impact on an organization, Shelley, do you want to tell us a little story about what happened with the oil spill and how you guys kind of handled that and that kind of changed some people's perspectives in terms of social use and community?
Yeah, basically it was early on getting our board and all of our stakeholders involved with social media. Of course, everybody remembers the oil spill, April 20th, 2010, and we got to the point the media just kept showing that same oil-soaked Pelican over and over and over, and just kept saying the entire Gulf Coast is just, covered in oil. And we were showing pictures saying, no, look at our emerald green waters. It's gorgeous. The white sand, it's perfect. And, people started getting kind of nasty with us. And finally, we just made that decision that we were going to be honest the entire time. And we decided that if and when the oil did actually come to our beaches, that we would show that. And so that was really a turning point. When the oil did come ashore, we showed videos every single day of what the beaches looked like, and that where we could have a little bit of oil over here, we didn't have it over here, and then all of all our followers just became loyal advocates for us because they said, oh wow, you guys are really telling the truth. The media is painting this horrible picture, and so we're not going to watch them anymore. We're just going to pay attention to what you're saying.
Yeah, and so what was the conversations like when the oil spill was occurring? And was there a bit of a hesitancy to be so transparent and honest about the process?
Oh, totally. Because, we all know we want to show our best pictures. You want that perfect. Sometimes as a beach destination, you can't show wet sand because it's not that perfect, bright white. You want to have it perfect. And, it was just that decision in the conference room. It's like, okay, we're going to have to be totally honest. We're going to have to make sure that even if it gets bad, we had no idea. This was in April, and we had a very big music festival coming up in May, and we didn't want to ruin the entire season. So it was just, we have to be honest. We have to let people know really what's going down.
Yeah, and what was the outcome of that? So as a community kind of said, hey, you're not lying. This is actually, you guys were telling the truth. What was the fallout of that?
Well, and they became even more loyal, and it was eye-opening for our stakeholders and for our board, because then they saw, okay, well, this social media thing, this is okay. This is actually going to work. It's not just a fad. Yep. People are paying attention. They're engaging with us. They're talking. They're sharing photos. And, it just became one of those things that, okay, we can believe in this. We can take stake in it.
Yeah, yeah. So did it create more loyal followings through advocates of the process?
Oh, big time. And, our fan base grew exponentially during the entire process because we were getting coverage from national and international media. But then we figured after the crisis was over that we would have a certain amount of attrition, that everybody would leave and they wouldn't pay any attention to us anymore. And that wasn't the case at all. They stayed with us, and they're still with us to this day, even more loyal.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it was a crisis that brought about that, but now you have a really loyal fan base. And how has that changed how your executives or board members look at social? Does it change how you report things or how they look at it? Has it taken a little bit of pressure off your back as a result?
A little bit. I mean, now they just believe in it. I believe. They can appreciate the fact that, that these are people that are talking about us, that it's real. They have their pictures. They have pictures of their kids. They're sharing with us how much they love the beach, how much. And even during the crisis, a lot of our fans were saying, I don't care if I can't go to the beach. I have to go, and I'm going to support the destination.
Yeah, so. That's awesome.
It was very interesting in Ottawa. We started out very slowly in social media. We got our social media accounts up and running. We worked with Destination Think to start our hashtag. And, we were working in the background. And then, all of a sudden, a year ago, there was the tragic shooting of the soldier in Ottawa. And because we already had our social media channels up and running, when that tragedy struck, that went crazy on social media and everybody was talking about it. But what was interesting was that evening after our Prime Minister had spoken on television, I went up to kind of see what was happening on Twitter, and one of our followers that uses our My Ottawa hashtag posted a beautiful picture of Ottawa and said, you know what, this is my Ottawa. And we saw that, and I thought, this is something that really needs to be amplified. And I slowly started retweeting campaign to just gauge what was going to happen, and everybody jumped on board. It was a very positive healing effect for the city. And what happened as a result was, quietly this little group is working in the background on social media, but the results that came from it, we had in a 48-hour period, we reached over 45 million people worldwide. We were trending in Canada, obviously in our city and in the province. And there were over 6,000 tweets that went out, and these were all very positive messages about our destination. It was a way for people to, we didn't change the conversation, we amplified a positive aspect and helped the city heal. And as a result of, being able to share the results of that event that took place, our CEO, it was really eye-opening, being able to share not only the results and the reach that we had, but the types of comments that came out of it. This was information that our CEO and president shared with our board and shared at our annual AGM. And that really was an eye-opening moment for our stakeholders to understand the power of social media.
And through that process, though, it wasn't just the volume. Can you talk about some of the other types of content, like the stories that were shared and the impact that had?
Yeah, so basically the types of content that people were sharing was about their favorite aspects of the city. So it was experiences, it was year-round things, things they love about the city, the people they love about the city, it was everything.
Yeah, but it's really the touchy, emotional side of the stories that were being shared that your board, correct me if I'm wrong, started sharing. They saw quotes and saying, wow, we have, Ottawanians? Ottawans. People from Ottawa.
Ottawans. Let's say Ottawans.
But sharing their messages and their story, and those are some of the really heart-wrenching pieces that the board stuck to,
That's
right?
what really resonated with them. And it's one thing to share stats, but when you can actually share the messages that come across, those are the things that really stick.
Yeah. So, in your guys' case, it was a bit of an unfortunate external event.
Yeah, it was an absolute tragedy, but it had a positive aspect in that it really did help the city heal from it.
Yeah. So, external forces, unfortunately for you guys, but it's brought about some change, and it's made your lives a little bit easier. Zach, going way back to the beginning, what were some of the initial change agents for you in terms of the culture shift at RTO4 and having that flip to understand that social is just not a bunch of numbers, et cetera. It needs to be more of a culture and the impact it has on the greater organization.
Well, I'm very fortunate to work within an environment with a lot of freedom, and I talked with David Peacock, and there's this enlightened leadership, and I'm not asking for a raise, but there was enough operating room in an entrepreneurial sense where if things could be proven and there was enough of a case built, and not a lot, but enough. And the operating budget would be available, the resources would be made available. So it's a very entrepreneurial environment, and I realize that a lot of tourism entities don't enjoy that to that extent. But nonetheless, David reminded me when I mentioned this over the lunch break, and I think he's being very gracious here, but he said clearly that the staff are also responsible for building that culture and making that change for digital transformation and the importance of digital, no matter where the organization is at. There are internal ambassadors that help do that. And one of the ways that we ended up making social a very important part of our MO was selling it internally.
Yep.
And if I can share just a little bit of the MO, what we usually see with digital and social is that the problem child projects get delivered to that. Oh, great, social's this shiny bauble,
right.
And here's a problem. We've never been able to sell tickets for this, or this is it's not working. Let's let them figure it out. I think that's really a backwards way to have digital transformation take place. Ultimately, it's about picking quick, easy wins in the social digital sphere, having them be low cost, low risk, and then building credibility within the organization with leaving a wake of measurable successes. And eventually, there's a tipping point where you don't have to fight for it as much.
So it's really in the baby steps of instead of trying to bite off a big project and get 200,000 views or interactions to some big number, you go small to like, hey, look, we drove 10 room nights with $200 or something really simple like that. So really baby steps. Is that?
It's a crawl, walk, run. When I talk with William Backer, he accuses me of saying crawl and fly, and that's what I'd like to do. But that's just not how it works. And we've gotten to the point where and this is another interesting angle on using digital and social. I think pretty much everyone in this room is already bought into the fact that it's a huge change in our industry, and it's a huge opportunity. But we don't often see organizations internally using these same tools to prove their case to use the tools in a broader context. So oftentimes we'll spend $10 or $20 testing out a concept, and before I'll even bring that to the rest of the team, there's some proof. There's some opportunity that's already been demonstrated, and that is very different than going to the C-suite level and saying, we need to do this. We've got this intuition that this will be important and this is a good thing to do. Very, very different if you approach it a bit entrepreneurially and say, you know what, I've built a little bit of a business case on this. I spent $20 of resources to test at the waters. Here was the learning. And oftentimes we don't do something. That was enough. We spent $20, it did not work. And we probably saved ourselves a lot of pain. So learning from failing fast is using the digital tools and the MO that digital affords you to choose the right digital projects that have likelihood for success, and doing them from small to big has been successful for us.
So the change for you guys is to, instead of asking for permission to do something, you go do a tiny project and then say, hey, look at this, and then showcase the value and then kind of progress the size of the project there. So then for David or whoever, not to speak for David, but he's looking at that saying, hey, those are great results to the bottom line. And it's more aligned with the business goals than marketing goals. Is that fair to say?
It is, and there may be 10 of those projects that didn't work for everyone that did, but there was very low risk for the organization, both in terms of time and money. So it's sort of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that really, the tap turned on by using the tools that we use to attract visitors to affect change within the organization in order to do that.
Shelley, what about you? What are some of the, cultural or roadblocks that you've encountered within your organization and in the last few years, I guess?
Oh, well, just the adoption, the adoption of the technology. I was, before you asked that question, I was thinking about some of our failures, if you want me to highlight on that, if that's okay.
It's totally okay.
But I was thinking about, we've had some campaigns that weren't very successful at all, and one of them we thought would be just a huge campaign, and it was relatively cheap, and it was getting people out on the beach for coastal candids.
She just hashtagged that. Did you catch that?
Hashtag coastal candids. And it was basically just walking up and down the beach, and we had all kinds of swag, and we were just going to hand that out, get people to take pictures, post it, and hashtag, and it didn't work. But unfortunately, I thought it was going to be an inexpensive project, but it ended up being, close to $5,000 when we put the time and the people and, the swag behind it. But there's a roadblock when you have a campaign that doesn't work, because, you get everybody in the office excited about something, and then, you have a campaign fall flat, and how do you bring them back around?
And how did you in that case? What?
Well, then we decided to take another campaign with coastal captions. And so basically we just had a campaign. It was, we took 4 images and we post 1 a quarter, and basically the whole idea is just to get everybody involved in generating these captions. And so the campaign is a month long, and we've generated 10,000 captions for 1 photo. And the VP of marketing looks at all these, because I make everybody read them so that we can have a winner chosen by committee. And she's reading this and she's like, wow, there's so much material here. There's so much that we can do with this. I can't believe the way people are responding to this 1 photo. And they love it. They just love the destination. And so now she's like, okay, let's work those into a program. The CEO uses it in his tourism summit presentation. I made a Wordle of all the captions, and he was all about that.
So again, it kind of comes back to maybe some destinations are trying to showcase success wrong by focusing on volume metrics. And it sounds like, again, those touchy-feely captions and those one-to-one interactions and exchanges is what really gets people's interest. And like, holy crap, somebody said that about our destination, and that's amazing, because then it's content for your CEO and them to be proud of. And so would you say maybe that instead of focusing on raw numbers, we should be focusing on the individual stories and the interactions?
I think so. I mean, I think that's kind of what we've been talking about a lot here. I'm still kind of into the numbers game, so I might be old-fashioned in that regard, but I think they play hand in hand, and we were talking about what Leah said earlier about showing the context and putting that in with the reports and showing the pictures of what people are posting and what they're saying. I think that adds a lot to it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, in talking to a lot of my colleagues during the conference, it's very clear that we're all in kind of the different, our stakeholders and our executive are kind of all in the different spectrum of their education of digital or social media. And, depending where you're at, I think that everybody can actually contribute to that education. Even if you're just, if you're running the social media accounts, I think you can provide those kinds of insights to your direct report. And I know for my staff, I think, moving forward, providing the insights of what people are talking about for our destination and ensuring that I include those in my board reports is something that it's a way for me to educate the stakeholders, and it involves my staff in it as well. So at every level, there's things that we can be doing to kind of make sure that those engagements and those stories are being told to further our path along the education.
I think you really nailed it with education, because I think, back when I was younger and I would have a new technology, I would get excited about the tech, and I realized I'm coming from a computer engineering background talking about tech to my bosses at the time or whoever, and I'm like, why don't you get this? But it comes down to they don't understand the tech like I do, so I need to educate them on the business value. And I feel like, social media is, some executives are like, oh, it's kind of a trend, kind of a fad. So they kind of perceive it as a bit of a hype. But once they are educated about the stories and the value and how the impact it plays, then it starts to change it. So it seems like there's a real opportunity to focus on the education of stakeholders and team members, to have them have the experiences that we're having here. Because hopefully you guys have all had some great learnings throughout the last 2 days. And so this is stuff that could be taken back and shared with your team members. So it seems like education's kind of key.
Yeah, we host a digital marketing summit every couple of years for all of our industry partners, and basically it's bringing this to them. So, we'll have our vendors that we work with all the time, they'll come and they'll sponsor this event. And it's just a great opportunity for those partners, for the mom and pops, the hoteliers, for the attractions, the B&B owner, all of them, to get that opportunity, because they can't afford to come take a day away from the office and travel to New Orleans or wherever and get all this education. So it's really valuable to them. And then you can actually see it once you start talking to them, and you can bring them into some of the programs that you're taking advantage of.
Yeah. It was interesting. I'm a analytics numbers geek myself, and if you're really vested in this stuff, it can be really hard to communicate. So getting a bit of a common vernacular, I think it would be a huge mistake not to use numbers. They need to be humanized, and so giving it some context and some here was a comment. David at RTO4 is great, because he also needs to cut through the clutter of saying, oh, that's really nice, but what isn't working? And we've really adopted a methodology where we learn a lot faster from things that don't work and what not to do. So sort of fail fast mentality. But whether their numbers and whatever you're tracking, whatever reveals the transparent lens on what's actually happening. And I think that's why digital and social is so exciting. Unlike a lot of conventional marketing, where it's sort of anyone's guess. The metrics are very wishy-washy, and there is really good hard data that you can't argue with. It's a lens. It's a truthful sort of entree into how is your destination doing. What are the numbers? How is traffic coming here and going? And so somehow communicating that internally within the organization in a language that everyone can share and speak is really critical. And quite frankly, I think a lot of it is a little bit of fear of I might not want to know exactly, how my ranking or is there negative sentiment about me. But when you do get over that, it's absolutely amazing when you get digital transformation and you start accepting that. And there's some problems here that we weren't aware of, and I'm listening now, and we're going to fix those. In fact, that wasn't that difficult, and look what that. And eventually, oh, our bottom line has risen as a result of this, and oftentimes our advertising expenses come down considerably.
I mean, you hit a really good point, is failing allows you guys to grow quicker. And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think, board members and everybody looking for those numbers to grow year over year, but nobody's saying how many failures did you have this year and what did you learn from it, right? So it creates a culture of we need big numbers and big wins, but nobody talks about the failures. So, I mean, that sounds fascinating. And I guess maybe to put David on the spot, I don't know where David is, but if David, if you're out there, a question, oh yeah, there you are hiding in the corner there. But I guess a question for you is, how do you look at that and say to Zach, hey, congrats, you failed, what did we learn? What's that conversation like from your perspective?
It's such a part of the culture now. It's almost, so like saying, what's it like to wear a shirt? And we look at every project, and in life, when you go out for breakfast, you have a win and a fail. The eggs were good, the coffee was cold. You sort of got to take that lens and say every single project actually has failures. And I think one of the best examples I heard was Dublin today, when Dublin said, we wish we'd done our brand metric analysis in year one, because when we learned what we weren't great at, that we actually didn't have a robust experience, wow, did it change things. And I imagine now you think of all those opportunities when it comes to what can you measure on this project. You start thinking, let's not do what we did 3 years ago and miss an opportunity to measure. And so in our office, it's always, okay, what really works about this project? What sucks? And very quickly you start winnowing away the stuff that's not productive and zeroing in on the stuff that was productive. I mean, we've done big campaigns, and we spent a lot of time, like everybody else, doing big campaigns and actually sort of skewing metrics to say why this wasn't such a bad campaign. And we should have been coming the other way going, what actually worked about this campaign? It's a culture thing. And once you start doing it, it's easy. It's like, if you have great parents, they raise you that way. They encourage you. We had this chat in your millennial session. You encourage them like mad, but you say, but be aware of your failures. Like, just learn from them. Don't do it again. Don't lose the car keys next time. I don't have to pick you up and bring extra car keys. But it's just a culture thing. You just get used to doing it. Make sure in everything you say, let's look at what we did right, but let's look at what we did wrong. And it's back to that hygiene motivator things. Apply it to projects. What's the hygiene stuff? What didn't we get right? What can we fix next time that'll optimize? And it just becomes a natural part of business.
Yeah, so the takeaway is tell your team we have to fail more when you go back, because that's going to go over really well.
Just that has led to that freedom to fail has really led to A/B test environment where you expect part of it to fail. In fact, it's great when it does, because it's a clear path to what the better option is. And that starts to get really, really exciting. If you can do small measured A/B tests, which we're a big fan of, you want one. If there's a clear failure, that's a real win. Yeah. And it's low risk, and culturally you start to see shift moving towards things that actually work.
So on the flip side of failure, though, how do you convey that to stakeholders? Because you have a supportive boss like David, who's like, hey, great, let's fail internally. But then how do you go to your stakeholders and say, oh, this campaign failed, but we learned a lot about it? Like, what's that relationship like?
We have an initiative called Enabling Engagement, and it means a lot of things. But the first part of the process when we're working with a partner is, let's look at, in an honest way, let's benchmark where you are in terms of digital operations. And that's oftentimes really revealing. And even that can be enough to be a seed for cultural change to happen, because there's all kinds of aha moments and awareness. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do some collaborative projects with them in the digital social realm. But we don't choose challenging projects. We choose ones what we think are going to be the low-hanging fruit and the easy wins and the low risk. We help mitigate that risk for the partner in the early stages. And then as we can hopefully successfully prove out some of these small mini projects, you start to develop enough traction with them that they start to experiment with that themselves. And then eventually, if things go well, you have a bit of a digital transformation in terms of attitude.
So really, sorry, Shelley, go ahead.
I was just going to say, sometimes we have the failures, and to answer the questions from the partners, it's just we fail so that they don't have to. So we
That's
can
a
do
good
the
quote.
testing and let it come out of our budget so it doesn't have to come out of theirs.
Yeah, that's a really good approach. So it sounds like it comes back to, in a nutshell, education of, showing here's the results, here's the test projects, here's what we learned. This is the information that you can learn and adapt from. And once they get comfortable and they're starting to see some of the failures, Shelley, like you just mentioned, then they're like, hey, we can do this. This makes sense. Now we have a clear path of a tested formula that works. And then
The one caveat I'll add is education is great, but we learned the hard way that unless the partner has skin in the game, transference of collective collaborative knowledge takes much, much longer.
Yep.
So if the partner is really vested in it, and in our case it's usually a co-funding type of initiative in the early stages, that makes a world of difference. They're really paying attention. They're literally affected with sensitive budgets in terms of the outcome of this small initiative. You can do one of those projects is probably equal to about 10 or 15 of ones where you're more of a crutch and you're coming in and saying, we're kind of acting like a consultancy, and that's not the intention. The intention is to have shared learning around digital initiatives, but have everyone share in the benefit of the savviness that results.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Great Lakes mentioned, is the shared priorities, because once you start to align priorities with industry groups, then you guys are both going for the same outcome, and if something doesn't happen that way, you can critically ask why and then improve for the next time. So that sounds like a really key part with industry, is finding those shared priorities and shared wins. And from you guys in the crisis situations, you had stakeholders and the city coming together, and that's kind of a shared priority to say, hey, Ottawa is great, it's not always this, it's unfortunate, but coming together. So finding that alignment with stakeholders seems to be a great way to kind of get their buy-in and change how they operate, because that's ultimately what we're looking for, is to try and get other people to be more digitally and socially active, because it'll make your jobs easier, right?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Awesome. So let me just to kind of wrap up, I guess, as a takeaway from here, because I think we've had a great opportunity to network and learn from a lot of different individuals, but for you guys, what are some of the takeaways that you're going to try and implement, and how are you going to communicate some of the change that you've seen here at the event to make a bit of a culture shift within the organization and with stakeholders?
I thought of something. So the number one thing is I'm going to change my reports, and I'm going to start including some of that contextual, the pictures with the captions, because, we're numbers geeks over here. So, the numbers are great, but to be able to bring that back in real life where they're seeing it when it's actually happening. But I think to actually put it down on a piece of paper, that would be great to share with them. So that's my number one thing. I know that's not very big, but it's going to be huge.
Big, though. And one of the takeaways that Zach was speaking about, how important the numbers are, and they are extremely important. And I think for me, when I come across a good piece of data or an article or statistics, I'll often send that information out to my team or to management or to the other directors. But I think it's really important to also, don't assume that they're going to take away from that what I would take away from that. You have to make sure that you're interjecting, isn't it really cool that this destination did this, and this is how I see the effect that it had. And make sure that those key points will get across to who it is you're trying to educate or to bring on board.
Yeah, explaining it. So to maybe just challenge you guys, and Zach, I'm really going to put you on the spot with David here, but if you could have your executive and your management team and the board kind of have one key learning or understanding or kind of shift in thinking, what would that really be? What would something be that would make your lives easier? And if you could just share one thing and have them change, what would that be?
So the one thing that we were talking earlier, and the one thing that that really came out was, if I could change one thing in the industry and my organization, it would be that everybody understands the importance of engagement and the effect that can have on the destination, on the brand, on the marketing, on the whole organization. And I think that's exactly where everything kind of needs to start, is with that engagement and that story. That really determines everything.
Yep. Zach's going to be quiet on this one.
It's not really because David's in the room. It's David. The reason why I love working at RTO4 is the political realm is taken care of. You know, David's great at providing a pathway through that to ensure budget and resource. I got involved in the organization while it was transitioning and into sort of an incubator model, and that in itself is really exciting. You don't feel part of a sort of something static or something that's really entrenched in the past way of thinking. Just a continuation of you know, a bit of a meritocracy, allowing us to operate in a situation where it's not a democracy and you don't have to be all things to all people. And we still see a lot of that. And sometimes there is pressure, you know, if you're doing this for so-and-so, then you also have to do it for, and sometimes staff members have to dig their heels in a bit and say, well, you know, it really doesn't make sense for so-and-so, and we're doing it for political reasons. And if the leadership has courage to really go to bat, you know, for their staff, then we can be a lot more effective in our jobs in digital social and focus on the projects that are going to succeed and have more likelihood to succeed, and not do projects because we have to for, you know, political reasons. So as we're going through this transformation to an incubator, that's on the horizon and it's very welcome.
Yep. And I think just to kind of close things, wrap things up here is, you know, thanks to you guys for sharing some of your stories and input from your organization. I think many of us in the room all are in similar situations at different levels of you know, progression. Like Zach and RTO4, you guys are much more involved as an organization, and so kudos to the whole team. And so obviously we all can't have Davids as our bosses that way, but hopefully everybody here has a chance to network with people that share similar challenges and find those little wins in terms of communicating the little values to start to make that shift in terms of the culture. Because I think we can all be leaders from the bottom up, so to speak. It's like, Zach, what you've been doing is just sometimes do the project, show the results, and you lead by example. And I think that's kind of the opportunity for all of us. So, but to aid that though, and this is, you know, not a plug, but you know, there's been some amazing presenters here on stage, and at the last couple SoMeT events in Europe and Australia, and all those presentations are available online, and all these presentations are available online. So I'd really encourage you guys, if something really stuck out and you guys were really, you know, quite impressed with that, share the presentation or link with a stakeholder or somebody you work with and have a conversation, because it sounds like, you know, just having that education or conversation about it, people will start to kind of realize, hey, that is a really good idea. Let's talk about more about that, and hopefully that can you know, bring about some of the change and make your lives easier throughout the organization and with your stakeholders. So I want to thank you guys very much for being here. Thank you guys very much. And I'm going to invite William to come on stage shortly after. So thank you guys.